The restaurant sat at the top of Station Aurelius, spinning slowly above a dying star that painted everything in shades of gold, and Red Kethvorian had chosen this place for its view, its privacy, and its reputation for keeping powerful guests alive long enough to finish their meals. He was old by any measure that mattered. 900 years of watching empires rise and fall, of accumulating wealth that could buy planets and enemies that could fill them. His scales caught the starlight as he shifted in his specially designed chair, gold and black patterns rippling like liquid metal across his massive form. The Dragon Lord and CEO of Draconis Interstellar Holdings did not come to places like the Celestial Terrace for the food. He came because appearances mattered, because the ambassador from the consortium sitting across from him needed to feel important, and because sometimes even ancient creatures wanted to pretend they were normal for an evening. Around him sat his usual entourage. 2 Vorthic bodyguards flanked the table, their bodies more machine than flesh after decades of military enhancement, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. His legal counsel, a Silurian named Veth, who possessed 7 independent brains and used all of them to find loopholes in interstellar law, studied the contract on his datapad. Ambassador Thelmarie from the consortium made small talk about mining rights and profit margins, while secretly wondering if the dragon would eat him if negotiations went badly. The restaurant hummed with quiet activity. Servers in crisp uniforms moved between tables where the wealthy and powerful conducted business that shaped the lives of billions. Crystal glasses clinked and expensive wines flowed, and everyone pretended not to stare at the dragon, who took up an entire corner of the establishment. Tetham was listening to the ambassador explain something tedious about extraction quotas when she appeared. The human waitress was small by almost any species standards, maybe 5'4" with brown hair pulled back in a practical style. She carried a water pitcher with the careful efficiency of someone who had done this exact task thousands of times before. Nothing about her stood out, nothing about her demanded attention. She was exactly the kind of person that powerful beings like Kethvorian had spent centuries learning to ignore. That was probably why he almost missed it. She approached the table with appropriate deference, eyes down, movements smooth and non-threatening. She refilled the ambassador's glass first, as protocol demanded, then moved around to Kethvorian's side of the table as she poured his water. Her hand trembled slightly. A cloth napkin slipped from her arm and landed beside his glass, face down against the white tablecloth. For anyone watching, it looked like a small accident, a minor breach of professional composure that she quickly tried to correct, but she did not pick up the napkin. Instead, she moved on to the next glass, her face carefully blank, her breathing just slightly faster than it should. Kethvorian had not survived 9 centuries by ignoring things that felt wrong. He reached for the napkin with one massive claw, the movement casual enough that no one would question it. Turned it over. 7 words were written there in shaky handwriting. Listen. Fake server armed left side. The dragon's ancient heart. 3 times the size of a human's. Did something it had not done in decades. It skipped a beat. His golden eyes did not move from the ambassador's face as his other senses went to work. Dragons had been apex predators long before they achieved spaceflight, and evolution had given them tools that technology could only imitate. He breathed in slowly, tasting the air with receptors that could detect chemical compounds at parts per billion. The restaurant smelled of cooked meat and wine and the various biological signatures of a dozen different species. But there, underneath it all, coming from somewhere to his left, metal and propellant, and the sharp chemical bite of military-grade stimulants. Everino let his Maireum gaze drift casually toward the server station. On the left side of the restaurant, human male stood there, Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the same crisp uniform as the other staff, he was adjusting something at his wrist. A movement that looked innocent, but carried the precise economy of someone who had practiced it many times. The dragon watched him for 3 seconds, and those 3 seconds, he saw everything the way demands. Weight was distributed for quick movement rather than long hours of standing, the way his eyes tracked Kethvorian's position, even while his body faced another direction, the slight bulge under his uniform. Jacket that could be a serving tool, but was almost certainly not the way he ignored the other servers. Spoke to no one, maintained perfect position with a clear line of sight to the dragon's table A. Professional someone had sent a professional to kill him. Kethvorian felt something that might have been admiration. Whoever had planned this had done their homework. They had gotten credentials past station security, placed their assassin in a position of trust, and waited for the perfect moment when the dragon would be distracted by business and politics. It might have worked, it should have worked, but they had not planned for a human waitress with trembling hands and more courage than common sense. Kethvorian found himself looking for her again. She had moved 3 tables away, refilling water glasses with mechanical precision, her back to the assassin as if she had never seen him. She was pretending to be invisible again, pretending to be nobody, pretending she had not just changed the entire shape of this evening. Smart. If the assassin suspected she had warned the target, she would be dead before anyone could protect her. The dragon carefully folded the napkin and slipped it into his jacket. His bodyguards had not noticed anything wrong, which meant he would need to have a serious conversation with them later about observation and awareness. For now, he needed to decide what to do about the man who had come here to kill him. He could signal his Vorthic guards. They would eliminate the threat efficiently and violently, probably destroying a significant portion of the restaurant in the process. Expensive, messy, and likely to cause diplomatic complications. With the consortium ambassador watching, he could alert station security through his personal communicator. By the time they responded, the assassin would either complete his mission or escape, neither outcome being acceptable, or he could handle this himself. Kethvorian smiled, careful to keep his teeth hidden so the ambassador would not panic. He had not personally dealt with a Naze assassination attempt in almost 50 years. He had forgotten how it made his blood sing. The assassin was checking his wrist again, running out of time. Whatever he carried, whatever weapon he thought could pierce dragon scales, he was preparing to use it. Kethvorian gauged distances and angles with the practiced ease of a predator who had been hunting since before humans invented fire. 7 meters to the assassin, 4 meters to the nearest civilian, 2 meters to Ambassador Thelmarie, who would probably soil his ceremonial robes when the violence started, and somewhere behind him, a human waitress who had risked everything to write 7 words on a napkin. Dragon decided he rather liked humans. Then the assassin's hand moved toward his weapon, and there was no more time for thinking. Myra Chen had worked at the Celestial Terrace for 11 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. She knew this because she counted every shift, every tip. Every credit that brought her closer to the ticket home. Earth was 47 light years away, a blue marble in a quiet corner of the galaxy, where her grandmother still lived in a small coastal town and made dumplings by hand. Every Sunday morning, Myra had left to find opportunity to escape the poverty that clung to the old Earth settlements like fog, to prove she could be something more than another struggling colonist in a universe full of beings who barely noticed humanity existed. She had found opportunity. In a way, she had found a job serving food to creatures so wealthy they could buy her entire hometown without checking their account balance. She had found a uniform that made her invisible and skills that made her useful, and a routine that kept her sane. She had not found heroism. She was not looking for it, but heroism, as it turned out, was not something you found. It was something that found you, usually at the worst possible moment. When you were tired and scared and absolutely certain you were not the right person for the job, the fake server had arrived 3 hours before. Kefvorian's reservation Myra had noticed him immediately. Not because he looked wrong, but because he looked too right. His uniform was perfect, creased in exactly the correct places, fitted like it had been made for him rather than pulled from the staff closet 10 minutes before a shift. His credentials had passed inspection, his references checked out, and the manager had assigned him to the West section without a second thought. But Mira had grown up in a place where you learned to watch people. Her neighborhood on Earth had not been dangerous exactly, but it had been the kind of place where knowing who belonged and who did not could mean the difference between a quiet walk home and something much worse. Humans called it situational. Awareness scientists called it evolved pattern recognition. The same instinct that had helped their ancestors spot predators in tall grass and enemies among friends. Myra just called it paying attention. This man did not belong. He held his serving tray wrong, gripping it like a shield rather than balancing it like a tool when he walked. His steps had the rolling efficiency of someone trained to move through combat zones. Not dining rooms. He never turned his back to the entrance, positioned himself with clear sight lines to the VIP section, and his eyes. Those were the thing that made Myra's stomach turn cold. His eyes never stopped tracking the dragon at table 7. She watched him for an hour. Then 2, hoping she was wrong, hoping her instincts were misfiring, hoping this was just some ex-military guy who needed a job and had not fully adjusted to civilian life. Then he checked his wrist for the 5th time, and she saw what he was checking, the outline of something strapped to his forearm, hidden under his sleeve, something that did not belong on a server in a high-end restaurant. Myra knew weapons not because she liked them, but because her 2 cousins had served in the colony wars and had come home in boxes because they had not known enough about the weapons pointed at them. She had learned everything she could after that. A grief-driven education in the tools people used to kill each other across the stars. What she saw under that man's sleeve was not a serving tool. She spent 20 agonizing minutes figuring out what to do. Her first instinct was to report him to the manager. But the manager was a Kelthian who believed humans exaggerated everything and would probably pat her on the head and tell her to stop imagining threats. Her second instinct was to call station security. But everyone knew station security was corrupt, slow, and more likely to take bribes than to take action. Her third instinct was to run, to walk out the service entrance and pretend she had never seen anything, to protect herself the way any sensible person would. But if she ran, what happened next? The dragon would die. Probably that was not her problem. She did not know the dragon did not owe him anything, had no reason to care if one more wealthy alien got removed from the universe, except the man with the weapon did not look like he was carrying a simple gun. He looked like he was carrying something designed to make sure the target stayed dead. Something with blast radius and collateral damage built into its design. If that weapon went off in this restaurant, it would not just kill the dragon, it would kill the ambassador sitting across from him. It would kill the 2 bodyguards who were just doing their jobs. It would kill the servers in the nearby sections. People Myra knew by name. People who had shared their lunch breaks and their complaints and their dreams with her. It would kill the kitchen staff, the dishwashers, the busboys. It might kill Myra too. Suddenly this was very much her problem. She grabbed a napkin from her station. Her hand shook as she wrote, the pen pressing too hard. The letters uneven and desperate. 7 words. It was all she could think to say. She did not have time for explanations or evidence or careful reasoning. She had time for 7 words and a prayer that the ancient creature at table 7 was smart enough to understand them. Getting the napkin to the dragon was the easy part. She had spent almost a year learning how to approach powerful guests without drawing attention. How to be useful and invisible at the same time, she walked to the table with her water pitcher, refilled glasses in the correct order, and let the napkin slip from her arm at exactly the right moment. The hard part was walking away. Every step felt like it took an hour. She could feel the assassin's presence to her left, could almost sense his eyes tracking movement in the restaurant. And she knew that if he suspected anything, if he saw her looking at him or acting strangely, he would abort the mission or accelerate it, and either way, people would die. She walked away. She refilled more glasses at another table, her hands steady now because panic had burned through her and left something cold and focused behind. She positioned herself near the kitchen entrance, close to cover, far from the blast zone. She had calculated in her head, and she waited. The dragon was reading the napkin. She could see him in her peripheral vision, see the way his massive head tilted slightly as he processed her message. For a terrible moment, she thought he would dismiss it, would crumple the napkin and return to his conversation and leave her standing there with her warning ignore. But dragons did not live for 900 years by ignoring warnings. She saw his nostrils flash. She saw his eyes move, casual and unhurried, toward the left side of the restaurant. She saw him find the assassin and she saw him smile. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of something ancient and predatory that had just realized it was not prey after all. Myra let out a breath. She did not know she had been holding the dragon, knew whatever happened next was out of her hand. She had done everything she could. She had done more than anyone should expect from a waitress who just wanted to go home. Now she just had to survive the next few minutes. The assassin moved first. His hand went to his wrist, and the weapon deployed with a soft mechanical whisper. A compact plasma accelerator designed to punch through military-grade armor at close range. Dragon scales were tough, legendary even, but they were not invincible. The right weapon at the right angle could end even an ancient life. He raised his arm and the targeting system painted Kethvorian's skull with an invisible beam, and his finger found the trigger. He never got to pull it. Myra saw what was about to happen a half-second before it did. She saw the assassin's posture change, saw his arm come up, saw the way his body aligned for the shot, and she moved without thinking. Her water pitcher was heavy, made of actual crystal, because the Celestial Terrace did not believe in synthetic materials for its service items. She dropped it directly in front of the nearest Vorthic bodyguard, a towering mass of metal and flesh named Torvik, who had been watching the entrance instead of the server station. The crash was spectacular. 3 pounds of crystal hitting marble floor at exactly the wrong moment, shattering into 1,000 pieces that sprayed across the polished surface. Like glittering shrapnel, Torvik spun toward the sound. It was instinct, the kind of reflexive response that military training drilled into you until it became automatic. He spun and stepped forward and put himself directly between the assassin and his target. The plasma bolt meant for Kethvorian's head hit Torvik's shoulder. Instead, the impact sent the Vorthic spinning, his cybernetic limb absorbing most of the energy but not all of it. Smoke and sparks erupting from damaged circuitry. He went down hard, and the second bodyguard was already moving, but everything was happening too fast. Kethvorian did not wait. 900 years of survival instinct translated into motion. That should have been impossible for something his size. He grabbed the table. 3,000 credits worth of aged Terran oak that weighed more than most humans could lift, and threw it at the assassin like it was made of paper. The assassin dodged. He was good, professionally trained. His body already moving before the table left a dragon's claws. He fired twice more, plasma bolts screaming through the air where Kethvorian had been standing a heartbeat earlier, but the dragon was not there anymore. The dragon was behind him. Kethvorian moved through the restaurant like a nightmare given form. his massive body weaving between tables with impossible grace, his claws carving furrows in the floor as he accelerated. The assassin tried to turn. He was not fast enough. One golden claw closed around his throat and lifted him off his feet, and suddenly the most dangerous creature in the room was not the one holding the weapon. The restaurant exploded into chaos. Patrons screamed and fled, knocking over chairs and trampling each other in their desperation to escape. Ambassador Thelmaris dove under the dessert cart, all 7 of his brains unanimously voting for survival over dignity. The second Vorthic bodyguard was shouting into his communicator, calling for backup that would arrive minutes too late to matter, and Mira pressed herself against the wall near the kitchen entrance, watching with wide eyes as the dragon dangled the assassin in the air like a broken toy. "Who sent you?" Kethvorian's voice was not loud. It did not need to bait. Was the sound of glaciers grinding against mountains, of tectonic plates shifting beneath continents, of something so old and powerful that volume was irrelevant. The assassin laughed. It was a wet, choking sound forced out past the pressure of the dragon's grip. But it was definitely a laugh. "You think this changes anything?" His voice was strained, but his eyes were calm, almost amused, like he knew something the dragon did not. "You think you won?" Kethvorian tightened his grip. "Think you are going to tell me everything, one way or another?" "No." The assassin smiled. "I am really not." He bit down. Myra saw his jaw move, saw something crack between his teeth, saw white foam begin to bubble from his lips. Poison tooths. She had read about them. Implants favored by certain organizations who valued secrecy more than the lives of their operatives. Fast-acting, impossible to counteract, designed to destroy neural tissue so thoroughly that even posthumous interrogation was impossible. The assassin was dead before Kethvorian could ask another question. The dragon let the body drop. It hit the floor with a sound that Mira knew she would hear in her nightmares for years. The soft thud of something that used to be a person becoming just meat and silent sex. Arian stood over the corpse for a long moment. Around him, the restaurant was ruined, tables overturned, crystal shattered. Blood from the wounded Vorthic spreading across the marble floor. Station security finally burst through the doors, weapons drawn, shouting orders that no one was listening to. The ambassador crawled out from under the dessert cart, his ceremonial robes stained with frosting, his dignity shattered beyond repair. And in the middle of all of it, a dragon lord worth more than most star systems stood very still and thought about what had just happened. He had been targeted. Someone had invested significant resources in trying to kill him, had placed a professional operative in position, and waited for the perfect moment, and they had failed because a human waitress had noticed something wrong. Kethvorian turned slowly, his ancient eyes scanning the chaos until they found her. Myra Chun, pressed against the wall, water pitcher shards scattered at her feet, brown hair escaping its practical. Taishi looked terrified. She also looked like she was trying very hard to think of a way to slip into the kitchen and pretend none of this had anything to do with her. Their eyes met. 900 years of life had taught Kethvorian many things, but one of the most important was how to recognize genuine courage. This human had seen a threat that his own security had missed. She had made a split-second decision to intervene. She had risked her life to write 7 words on a napkin, and then she had dropped a pitcher at exactly the right moment to save his life. A second time he owed her a debt. Dragons did not forget their debts. Kethvorian inclined his head toward her, just slightly, a gesture that had crowned kings and condemned enemies across 9 centuries of accumulated power. Acknowledgement, recognition, the promise that this was not over. Myra stared back at him with an expression that suggested she was beginning to realize she had gotten herself into something far bigger than a dropped water pitcher. She was right. She had no idea how right she was. 3 days past, Mira spent them in a state of suspended animation. Going through the motions of life while waiting for the other shoe to drop, she expected to be questioned by station security. But no one came. She expected to be fired from the restaurant. But instead she received paid leave and a polite message suggesting she take some time to recover from the traumatic incident. She expected, in her darker moments, to be visited by friends of the dead assassin. But her apartment remained quiet, and her door remained intact on the 4th day. She received an invitation. The paper it was printed on probably cost more than her weekly salary. Heavy cream cardstock with gold leaf edges and text that shimmered when it caught the light. Kethvorian of Draconis Interstellar Holdings requested her presence at his corporate headquarters at her earliest convenience. A car would be sent. A car was sent. It was not really a car so much as a small spacecraft with leather seats and a minibar, piloted by a silent Vorthik who looked like he could crush Myra's skull with one hand, but instead offered her a choice of refreshments and asked if the temperature was comfortable. Myra declined the refreshments and spent the entire trip trying to figure out what she would say to a dragon lord who probably wanted to know why a random waitress had no more than his professional security team. Draconis Tower dominated the business district of Station Aurelius, a needle of black glass and chrome that stretched toward the stars like it was trying to escape the station entirely. The top floor belonged to Kethvorian alone. Myra stepped out of the elevator into a space that made her feel like she had shrunk to the size of an insect. The ceiling was 30 meters above her head. The walls were transparent, offering a view of the cosmos that would have cost more than most people's lifetime earnings. And in the center of it all, silhouetted against the light of dying stars, stood the dragon she had saved with 7 words and a drop picture. He was even more impressive in this setting, his scales catching the starlight and throwing it back in patterns of gold and shadow. When he turned to face her, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the weight of centuries, the patience of something that had learned to think in decades rather than days. Myra Chun, his voice rumbled through the vast space like distant thunder. You came. You sent a car. The words came out before she could stop them, her mouth working faster than her common sense. It would have been rude to refuse. Something that might have been amusement flickered across the dragon's features. Practical. I like that. Come closer. We have things to discuss. Mira walked across the polished floor, her footsteps echoing in the silence, until she stood close enough to feel the heat radiating from Kethvorian's massive body. Dragons ran hot. She remembered reading somewhere, their metabolism burning like a furnace to power their incredible size and strength. Up close, he smelled like old stone and something faintly metallic, like the heart of a mountain brought to life. You knew. The dragon's statement was not a question. You saw what my trained security professionals missed. You identified a threat that could have ended my life, and you chose to intervene. I want to know why. Mira had thought about this question. She had prepared answers, reasonable explanations that would make her seem logical and measured, and not at all like someone who had acted on pure, terrified instinct. None of those answers came out of her mouth. Humans notice things, she heard herself say. We evolved on a planet full of predators, so we learned to watch for them, to read the small signs that something was wrong. He moved like a soldier and watched you like prey. It was not hard to see once I started looking, and yet you intervened. Kethvorian leaned closer, his golden eyes studying her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. For a dragon, your species has little love for mine. The Kepler subjugation is still remembered. That was 200 years ago, Myra shrugged, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I was not there. Neither were you from what I understand. I do not hold grudges for things that happened before I was born. Then why risk yourself? Myra thought about the question. Really thought about it, searching for the honest answer underneath all the practical justifications. If he had killed you, the blast would have taken out half the restaurant. 20 or 30 people, my coworkers, the kitchen staff. People I knew. She paused. An ambassador who did not deserve to die covered in dessert. The dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh self-interest then. Partly, Myra admitted. But also, she hesitated. Then pushed forward, deciding she had nothing left to lose. Nobody deserves to be murdered over dinner. Not even a dragon lord who owns half of known space. Silence stretched between them. Kithvorian studied her for a long moment. His ancient eyes unreadable, his expression giving nothing away when he finally spoke. His voice was different, softer somehow. As if he was sharing something he rarely said aloud. The assassin was sent by the Velkith Syndicate. They wished to destabilize the Consortium Treaty and profit from the chaos that would follow my death. My intelligence network failed to detect the threat. He paused. Your human pattern recognition did not. Myra did not know what to say to that. So she said nothing. I am reevaluating certain assumptions about your species. Kithvorian continued. For too long we have dismissed humans as too short-lived to matter. Too soft to pose a threat. Too simple to be useful. You have shown me that this assessment may have been incorrect. He moved closer and extended one massive claw. Resting in his palm was a small data chip, no larger than Myra's thumbnail. Its surface gleaming with embedded circuitry. A job offer, the dragon said. Head of Personal Security Analysis. You would work directly with me, reviewing threats, identifying patterns that others miss, doing what you did in that restaurant, but on a much larger scale. Myra stared at the chip. The salary is substantial. Kithvorian continued. The enemies are many. The work is never boring, and you would have access to resources that most humans cannot imagine. I was saving to go home, Myra heard herself say, to Earth. My grandmother makes dumplings every Sunday. I was going to help her in her shop, live a quiet life. Be normal. Is that what you want? The question hung in the air between them. Heavy with implications, Myra thought about Earth. About the small coastal town and the smell of the ocean. And the peaceful routine of a life without dragons or assassins or decisions that changed the course of empires. Then she thought about the restaurant. About the moment she had seen something wrong and chosen to act. About the weight of the napkin in her hand and the terror. And the strange, fierce satisfaction of knowing. She had made a difference. She thought about 23 people who had walked out of the celestial terrace alive because she had trusted her instincts. She thought about the kind of person who could see those people die and walk away. Because it was not her problem. That was not who she wanted to be. When do I start? Kithvorian smiled, showing teeth that could shear through starship hulls. And in that moment, Mira-chan's quiet life ended, and something much stranger began. Immediately, the dragon said, We have much work to do, and the Syndicate will not wait for us to be ready. 18 months later, the galaxy looked different. The Velkith Syndicate, once a shadow empire that had operated across 12 star systems with impunity, was broken. Its leaders were in prison or in hiding. Its networks were dismantled. Its wealth was seized and redistributed to the victims of its countless crimes. And at the center of this transformation stood an unlikely partnership that no one had seen coming. Kithvorian addressed the Galactic Commerce Council from a podium designed to accommodate his massive frame, his testimony providing the final evidence needed to prosecute the Syndicate's remaining operatives. Behind him, displayed on screens 3 stories tall, were documents and communications and financial records that traced every thread of the conspiracy. Back to its source, the council members listened in silence. Representatives from 100 different species, all focused on the dragon who had nearly died in a restaurant and the investigation that had followed. But it was not Kithvorian who captured the attention of those watching. It was the human woman standing at his side, Myra. Chun had changed in 18 months. Her posture was different now, confident rather than careful. Her eyes constantly moving and assessing in a way that made seasoned security professionals uncomfortable. She wore a suit that cost more than her old monthly salary, carried a datapad that connected her to intelligence networks spanning the known galaxy, and had the ear of one of the most powerful beings in existence. She had also personally identified 17 infiltration attempts, 4 corporate espionage rings, and a conspiracy that reached into the Commerce Council itself. The other species in the chamber watched her with new eyes. Humans had always been a minor presence in galactic affairs, tolerated but not respected, employed in service positions but rarely trusted with real responsibility. This human had helped bring down an empire after the session ended. Ambassador Thelmarie approached Myra in the corridor outside the council chamber. The Silurian had recovered his dignity since the restaurant incident, though rumor said he still refused to eat dessert in public, and all 7 of his brains were clearly working overtime as he studied the human before him. "I have spent decades analyzing your species," he said, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance that indicated deep concentration. "I still do not understand you. You risked your life for a dragon. There was no profit in it, no obligation, no logical reason to intervene." Myra smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in the restaurant, the one that suggested she knew exactly how strange her choices seemed to other species and did not particularly care. "There is a human saying," she replied, "evil wins when good people do nothing." The ambassador's multiple brains processed this statement. "But you barely knew him. He was not your tribe. Your species has a concept of in-groups and out-groups, of loyalty earned through shared experience. The dragon was a stranger to you." "Yes," Myra agreed. "He was behind her." Ketvorian rumbled what might have been a laugh, the sound vibrating through the corridor like distant thunder. "That is the thing about humans, Ambassador. Their tribe is whoever they decide it includes." The dragon moved to stand beside Myra, his massive form making her look even smaller by comparison. Yet somehow the size difference no longer seemed to matter. They choose their loyalties, and once chosen, they do not waver. Thelmarie considered this an inefficient system, prone to error. Logically, one should only invest resources in protecting those who can reciprocate. And yet, here we are. Ketvorian gestured at the council chamber behind them. An empire fallen, a conspiracy exposed. The balance of galactic power shifted, all because a waitress decided to write 7 words on a napkin. The ambassador's 7 brains were very quiet for a moment. "I will need to revise my models of human behavior." Myra shrugged. "I saw someone in danger. I had information that could help, so I helped." She glanced at the dragon who had become her employer, her mentor, and against all probability, her friend. "It is not complicated," but it was. Complicated it was perhaps the most complicated thing in the galaxy. Humans made decisions based on feelings as much as logic. They formed bonds with creatures who should have been their enemies. They risked everything for strangers based on nothing more than a sense that it was the right thing to do. They were small and fragile and lived barely a century. And somehow they kept surprising everyone as they walked away from the council chamber. Ketvorian spoke quietly, his voice pitched for Myra's ears alone. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your quiet life behind, your grandmother's dumplings, the peace you could have had?" Myra thought about the question. She thought about Earth, about the small coastal town she had never returned to, about the grandmother who still wrote her letters every week, asking when she was coming home. She thought about the life she had planned, the simple existence she had been saving for, the person she would have become if she had looked at a suspicious server and decided it was not her problem. No, she said finally. I do not regret anything. Kethvorian nodded. Good. Because we have received intelligence about a new threat. Something the Syndicate was working on before their collapse. Something that makes the restaurant incident look like a minor inconvenience. When do we start? Now. The dragon smiled, showing teeth that could tear through starship hulls. I told you the work was never boring, Myra-chan. Once a waitress, now something far more interesting. Smiled back around them, the galaxy continued to spin, full of threats and opportunities and beings who still underestimated humans at their peril. Somewhere on Earth, a grandmother made dumplings and waited for a letter that would explain why her granddaughter could not come home yet. Why there was always one more thing to do, one more danger to face. One more moment where someone needed to be brave. She did not fully understand. But she was proud. Her Mira had always noticed things other people missed now. The whole galaxy was starting to notice too, and that, more than the money or the power or the title, was what made it all worth it. The universe was vast and dangerous and full of ancient beings who had forgotten what it felt like to be. Surprised humans reminded them one napkin at a time.